They say money can't buy class, but it can certainly buy a lot of silence. Harrison Sterling thought he had it all: the penthouse, the multi-million-dollar company, and the perfect obedient wife he picked up from nowhere. He treated her like a prop. He treated her like trash. And on the most important night of his life in front of New York's elite, he made the fatal mistake of throwing her out like yesterday's garbage. He didn't know who she really was. He didn't know that the man walking through the door wasn't just a guest. He was the owner of everything Harrison touched. And he was coming for blood. The silence in the penthouse was sharper than broken glass. It was the kind of silence that usually preceded a storm, the kind Lily Sterling had become intimately familiar with over the last 3 years. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of their apartment at 432 Park Avenue, looking out over the grey expanse of Central Park. The view cost $15 million, but to Lily it just looked like a prison yard from a very high altitude. "Are you wearing that?" The voice came from the staircase. Harrison Sterling descended, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke Brioni suit. He was a handsome man, undeniably so, with the kind of jawline that graced Forbes covers and the cold, dead eyes of a shark that smells blood in the water. Lily turned her hands clasped in front of her. She was wearing a soft, cream-colored silk dress. It was vintage understated and lacked the flash of sequins or the aggressive branding of the current season's Gucci or Prada. "It belonged to my grandmother," Lily said softly. "I thought, for the gala tonight, since it's for the Heritage Foundation." Harrison reached the bottom of the stairs and walked over to her. He didn't stop until he was uncomfortably close, invading her personal space with the scent of expensive scotch and sandalwood. He reached out a hand, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. The gesture mimicked affection, but his grip was tight enough to hurt. "Lily." He sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. "We are sitting at the head table tonight. The board of directors will be there. Investors from Dubai are flying in. And you want to wear rags?" "It's not rags, Harrison. It's 1950s silk. It's timeless." "It's used," he sneered, dropping his hand and stepping back to pour himself a drink from the crystal decanter on the sideboard. "God, you still smell like the orphanage, don't you? No matter how much money I spend on you, you still dress like you're waiting for a handout." Lily looked down at her shoes. She didn't fight back. She never fought back. That was the deal. Harrison had found her working as a library archivist in a dusty basement in Boston. He had swept her off her feet with grand gestures and promises of security. But the moment the ring was on her finger, the romance evaporated, replaced by a regime of control and criticism. To the world, Harrison Sterling was the brilliant CEO of Sterling Dynamics, a logistics tech unicorn about to go public. To Lily, he was a warden. "I have the emerald dress the stylist sent over," Harrison said, taking a sip of the amber liquid. "The one with the back cut out. Wear that. And put on the diamond choker I bought you for your birthday. The big one. We need to look like success, Lily, not like a charity case." "I don't like that dress, Harrison. It's exposing." Harrison slammed the glass down on the marble counter. The sound echoed through the vast, empty room. "I don't care what you like. I care about my stock price. I care about the image of this family. You are my wife. That means you are an extension of my brand. If you look cheap, I look cheap. Now go upstairs and change. And fix your face. You look tired." Lily stood still for a moment, her heart hammering against her ribs. She thought about the phone call she had received 3 days ago. The private number. The voice she hadn't heard in 20 years. "It's time, little bird. You've hidden long enough." She had told the voice she needed more time. But looking at Harrison now, seeing the pure contempt in his eyes, she wondered why she was waiting. "Yes, Harrison," she whispered. As she walked past him toward the stairs, he didn't even look at her. He was already typing furiously on his phone. Lily caught a glimpse of the screen. A text message. Recipient Jessica V. Message: "Can't wait to see you tonight." The red dress, Lily gripped the banister, her knuckles turning white. She knew about Jessica. Everyone knew about Jessica Vane, the sleek, predatory PR executive Harrison had hired 6 months ago. She was everything Lily wasn't: loud, aggressive, and knew money. Lily went upstairs to the master bedroom, but she didn't reach for the emerald dress immediately. Instead, she went to the back of her closet, to a small locked safe hidden behind a row of winter coats. She keyed in the code her mother's birthday, and the door clicked open. Inside wasn't jewelry or cash. It was a single heavy envelope made of thick, legitimate cardstock, embossed with a crest that hadn't been seen in high society circles for a decade. A crest of a black lion holding a golden key. She ran her thumb over the wax seal. "Grandfather," she whispered to the empty room. "I'm sorry I ran away." She took a deep breath, closed the safe, and reached for the emerald dress Harrison wanted her to wear. Tonight was the night. If Harrison wanted a show, she would give him one. But the ending wouldn't be the one he wrote. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a sea of black ties, designer gowns, and fake laughter. The air smelled of expensive perfume and floral arrangements that cost more than a mid-sized sedan. This was the gala of the century, a charity event for the New York Arts Preservation Society. But everyone knew the real purpose: networking. Harrison Sterling entered the room like he owned it. He had Lily on his arm, his grip firm on her elbow, steering her like a vehicle. "Shoulders back," he hissed out of the side of his mouth while smiling at a photographer. "Smile. Stop looking like a deer in headlights." Lily forced a smile. The emerald dress was tight, the sequins scratching her skin, and the diamond choker felt like a dog collar, which she supposed it effectively was. "Harrison, you look magnificent." A man with a silver fox demeanor and a Patek Philippe watch approached them. It was Charles Dalloway, one of the primary investors Harrison was trying to woo for the upcoming IPO. "Charles," Harrison beamed, shaking the man's hand vigorously. "Good to see you. You know my wife Lily." Charles looked at Lily, his eyes lingering for a second too long on the low neckline of her dress. "Charmed as always. You're a lucky man, Harrison. A trophy in every sense of the word." "She tries," Harrison joked, a cruel edge to his laugh. "If only she could cook, I'd be all set." The men laughed. Lily stood frozen, her smile plastered on her face like a mask. "So, Harrison," Charles said, leaning in, "rumor has it there's a mystery guest tonight. The table at the front reserved for the Blackwood Trust. Nobody's seen a Blackwood in New York since the scandal in the 90s. Harrison waved a dismissive hand. "Old money ghosts, Charles. Probably just a representative sending a check. These dynasties die out. The future belongs to tech, to innovation. To us." "I don't know," Charles mused, sipping his champagne. "The Blackwood family. They practically built this city's steel infrastructure. If Teddy Blackwood is actually alive, he could buy and sell everyone in this room before breakfast." Lily felt a cold shiver run down her spine at the mention of the name. Teddy. She kept her eyes on the floor. "Excuse me," Harrison said abruptly. I see Jessica over there. We need to discuss the press release for tomorrow." Before Lily could object, Harrison unlatched his arm from hers and strode across the room. Standing near the ice sculpture was Jessica Vane. She was impossible to miss. She wore a dress of crimson-red satin that looked like liquid fire. It was backless, strapless, and screamed for attention. Her dark hair was slicked back, her lips painted a matching red. Lily watched from a distance as Harrison approached her. He didn't touch her, not in public, but the intimacy was obvious. The way he leaned in. The way Jessica threw her head back and laughed, touching his forearm. The way their bodies angled toward each other, excluding the rest of the room. Lily felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to see a waiter holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres. "Madam Crab Cake." "No, thank you," Lily said. Her stomach was in knots. She needed air. She began to weave through the crowd, heading toward the terrace doors. As she passed a group of socialites women she had tried to befriend for years, only to be rejected for her lack of pedigree, she heard her name. "Can you believe she's wearing that?" one woman whispered, giggling behind a fan. "It looks like a costume." "Harrison told my husband he found her in a library," another sneered. "Literally a nobody. He's just waiting for the IPO to clear, then he's going to trade her in. Everyone knows Jessica is the real Mrs. Sterling in waiting." Lily kept walking her head high, though her eyes stung with tears. She pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped out onto the terrace. The cool night air of Manhattan hit her face a relief from the stifling atmosphere inside. She walked to the stone railing and looked down at the street below. Limousines were still arriving. She pulled her phone from her clutch. She had one message. "Sender, grandfather." Message, ETA, 10 minutes. Hold your head up, Lily. The lion does not concern himself with the opinions of sheep. She took a shaky breath. She had been Lily Jenkins, the orphan, for 20 years. She had been Lily Sterling, the trophy wife, for 3. She wasn't sure if she remembered how to be Lily Blackwood. "There you are." The voice made her jump. Harrison had followed her out. He looked furious. "What are you doing out here?" he demanded. "The chairman of Goldman Sachs is asking for me, and I need you by my side to look adoring. Why must you always make this difficult? I just needed some air." "Harrison, the perfume inside is overwhelming." "You're embarrassing me," he spat, closing the distance between them. "Hiding outside like a frightened child. Jessica is inside, charming the entire room. Why can't you be more like her?" "Maybe because I'm your wife and she's your mistress," Lily said. The words came out before she could stop them. The silence that followed was terrifying. Harrison's face went blank. Then a slow, cruel smile spread across his lips. "Oh," he said softly. "You think you have leverage. You think you can talk back to me because you have a ring on your finger. Let me make something clear, Lily. You are nothing. You are an investment that hasn't paid off. Without me, you're back in that basement library, sorting Dewey Decimals." He grabbed her wrist. "Now you're going to come inside. You're going to sit at that table. You're going to smile. And if you say one word about Jessica, I will cancel your credit cards and kick you out on the street tonight. Do you understand?" Lily looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time, the fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "I understand perfectly, Harrison," she said. "Good." He yanked her arm, pulling her back toward the doors. "Now let's go." They re-entered the ballroom. The lights had dimmed. Dinner was about to be served. Harrison marched her to table 1, the prime table, where Jessica Vane was already seated, boldly occupying the chair next to Harrison's, leaving Lily the seat on the far edge next to an elderly donor who was already asleep. Harrison sat down and immediately turned his back on Lily to talk to Jessica. Jessica glanced at Lily, a smirk playing on her red lips. She raised her wine glass in a mock toast. Lily sat down. Her hands were trembling, but not from fear. She looked at the empty table at the very front of the room, the one reserved for the Blackwood Trust. It was still empty. But the 10 minutes were up. The first course was a lobster bisque, rich and creamy, served in delicate china bowls. The clinking of silver spoons against porcelain created a polite rhythmic hum throughout the ballroom. At the head table, however, the atmosphere was toxic. Harrison was deep in conversation with Charles Dalloway on his left and Jessica Vane on his right. Lily sat in silence, staring at the floral centerpiece white lilies that reminded her too much of a funeral. The Asian market is ripe for the taking, Jessica was saying, her hand resting casually on Harrison's sleeve. Her voice was pitched just loud enough to be heard by the surrounding influential guests. Sterling Dynamics is the only firm with the infrastructure to handle the logistics. Harrison has been brilliant with the expansion strategy. Truly. Charles nodded, impressed. And what does Mrs. Sterling think of the expansion? He looked past Harrison to Lily, trying to include her. Harrison didn't let her answer. Lily doesn't follow the business side of things, Charles. She prefers simpler pursuits, gardening, reading fiction. Actually, Lily said, her voice steady, despite the trembling of her hands under the table. I was reading the quarterly reports yesterday. The overhead in the Singapore distribution center is up 15%. If we don't consolidate the shipping lanes, the profit margin will vanish by Q3. The table went silent. Harrison froze his fork halfway to his mouth. He slowly turned his head to look at her, his eyes cold and predatory. Jessica let out a short, sharp laugh. Oh, honey, Jessica smirked. That's cute. But leave the math to the adults, okay? You probably confuse the gross with the net again. I have a degree in mathematics, Jessica, Lily said quietly, from MIT, before I had to drop out to care for my sick mother. I know how to read a balance sheet. Harrison slammed his fork down. The sharp clang made several people at nearby tables jump. That is enough, he hissed at Lily. Stop trying to sound smart. You're embarrassing yourself. Jessica, sensing Harrison's irritation was at its peak, decided this was the moment to drive the final nail into the coffin. She reached for the bottle of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon sitting between them. Let me top you off, Harry, she cooed. As she lifted the heavy bottle, she looked directly at Lily with a venomous smile. Then, with a flick of her wrist that looked like a clumsy accident to everyone else, but was precise as a surgeon's scalpel, she tipped the bottle. A dark crimson wave cascaded out. But not into Harrison's glass. Jessica jerked her hand, splashing the red wine all over the front of Lily's cream-colored vintage silk dress. The liquid soaked in instantly, ruining the delicate fabric, spreading like a fresh, bloody wound across her chest and lap. Oh no, Jessica shrieked, jumping up and feigning shock. Oh my God! Lily, look what you did! You bumped my arm. I didn't move, Lily cried out, standing up as the cold wine seeped through to her skin. You poured it on me. Me? Jessica gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. Why would I do that? You were flailing your arms around, trying to make a point about Singapore. Harrison, I'm so sorry. She's just so clumsy. Harrison stood up, his face purple with rage. He looked at Lily, stained, dripping, the center of attention of the entire room. The perfect image he wanted to project was shattered. You useless! Harrison trailed off, his voice trembling with suppressed fury. He grabbed a cloth napkin and threw it at her. It hit her in the face. Clean yourself up, he snarled. Harrison, she did it on purpose, Lily pleaded, wiping the wine from her cheek. Please, just look at her. Stop lying, Harrison shouted. The ballroom fell deathly silent. The band stopped playing. 500 of New York's elite turned to watch the spectacle. Harrison realized he had an audience. He needed to save face. He needed to show he was in control. I have tolerated your incompetence, your lack of grace, and your plain stupidity for 3 years, Lily, Harrison announced, his voice booming in the quiet hall. But ruining this night in front of my investors, in front of my guests. He pointed a shaking finger at the double doors at the back of the room. Get out. Lily froze. What? I said, get out, Harrison roared. You are not fit to sit at this table. You are not fit to wear the name Sterling. Go home, pack your bags, and get out of my apartment. We are done. Harrison, you can't be serious, Charles Dalloway interjected, looking uncomfortable. It was just an accident. A little wine. It's not the wine, Charles. It's her, Harrison yelled, losing all composure. She's a millstone around my neck. I pulled her out of the gutter, and she's tried to drag me back down ever since. He waved at the security guard standing by the wall. 2 large men in dark suits stepped forward. Escort Mrs. Sterling out, Harrison commanded. If she resists, drag her. Harrison, please, Lily whispered, tears finally spilling over. Don't do this. Take her. The guards moved in. One of them grabbed Lily's upper arm, his fingers digging into her flesh. Ma'am, you need to come with us, the guard grunted. Jessica Vane sat back in her chair, picked up her wine glass, and took a slow, satisfied sip, watching Lily being manhandled. Lily was forced away from the table. She stumbled in her heels as the guards pulled her toward the exit. The crowd parted like the Red Sea people, whispering, staring, judging. She felt small. She felt broken. She felt like the orphan girl she used to be, unwanted and discarded. They reached the center of the room. The exit was only 50 feet away. Then a sound cut through the tension. Boom! The heavy double doors of the ballroom didn't just open. They were thrown open with such force that they banged against the walls, cracking the plaster. A gust of wind seemed to enter the room, chilling the air. The security guards stopped Lily, still in their grip. Harrison looked up, annoyed. Who the hell is interrupting now? Harrison shouted. Standing in the doorway was a phalanx of 6 men. They were not hotel security. They were dressed in bespoke charcoal suits, wearing earpieces, and they moved with the lethal precision of military special forces. They marched into the room, creating a corridor. And then he walked in. The man was old, perhaps in his late 80s, but he moved with a vigor that defied his age. He wore a tuxedo that looked like it had been tailored on Savile Row in 1960, and maintained impeccably ever since. He leaned on a cane made of black ebony wood, topped with a handle of solid gold in the shape of a roaring lion. He had a shock of snow-white hair and a beard to match, but it was his eyes that terrified everyone in the room. They were steel-grey, sharp, and currently burning with an inferno of rage. The room didn't just go quiet, it went catatonic. Charles Dalloway, still sitting at the head table, dropped his wine glass. It shattered, but nobody looked. Charles stood up, his face pale as a sheet. "My God," Charles whispered. "It's him. It's the lion." Harrison, blinded by his own arrogance and the adrenaline of the moment, didn't recognize the man. He only saw an intruder, an old man interrupting his power play. "Excuse me," Harrison barked, stepping away from the table and striding toward the center of the room where the guards were holding Lily. "This is a private event. You need to leave immediately before I have you arrested for trespassing." The old man didn't even look at Harrison. He kept walking his cane, tapping rhythmically on the parquet floor. Tap, tap, tap. The 6 bodyguards moved with him, forming a protective wedge. "Are you deaf?" Harrison yelled, stepping into the old man's path. "I said, who do you think you are?" The old man stopped. He slowly turned his head to look at Harrison. The gaze was so intense that Harrison actually took a step back involuntarily. "I am the man who owns the building you are standing in," the old man said. His voice was gravel and thunder. "I am the man who owns the bank that holds your mortgage. And currently, I am the man wondering why a piece of filth like you is breathing my air." Harrison blinked, confused. "What? Who?" The old man turned his attention away from Harrison and looked at the 2 security guards holding Lily. "If you do not remove your hands from her in the next 1 second," the old man said calmly, "I will have both of your arms broken before you can blink." The guards, sensing a predator far more dangerous than the hotel manager, instantly let go of Lily and backed away, hands raised in surrender. Lily stood there, shivering, wine dripping from her dress. She looked up at the old man. Her lip trembled. "Grandfather," she whispered. A collective gasp went through the room. 500 heads turned. Grandfather Harrison's jaw dropped. "What did you call him?" The terrifying anger in the old man's face vanished the moment he looked at Lily. His expression softened into heartbreaking tenderness. He handed his cane to one of his bodyguards and opened his arms. "I'm here, Lily," he said softly. "I'm here, little bird." Lily ran to him. She buried her face in his chest, sobbing uncontrollably. The old man wrapped his arms around her, shielding her from the stares, from the cruelty, from the husband who had just discarded her. He kissed the top of her head, stroking her hair. "I've got you," he murmured. "It's over. The hiding is over." He pulled back slightly and took off his tuxedo jacket, draping it over her shoulders to cover the wine stain. Then the steel returned to his eyes. He turned Lily so she was standing beside him, his arm firmly around her shoulders. He faced Harrison Sterling. "Harrison!" Charles Dalloway called out from the table, his voice shaking. "You idiot! That is Theodore Blackwood. That is the chairman of the Blackwood Trust." Harrison felt the blood drain from his face. The Blackwood Trust. The entity that controlled nearly 40% of the logistics infrastructure in North America. The silent giant of the global economy. Mr. Blackwood. Harrison stammered, his arrogance evaporating instantly. I didn't know. I had no idea that Lily, that she was related to... Related? Theodore Blackwood laughed a dry, humorless sound. "She isn't just related, boy. She is my only granddaughter. She is the sole heir to the Blackwood Empire. Her net worth as of her 25th birthday last week exceeds $50 billion. The number hung in the air. 50 billion. Jessica Vane, who had walked up behind Harrison to see what was happening, choked on her breath. Harrison looked at Lily, the woman he had called a nobody, the woman he had mocked for wearing rags, the woman he had treated like a servant. She was worth more than his entire company would be worth in 100 lifetimes. "Lily," Harrison said, putting on his most charming, desperate smile. He took a step forward, reaching out a hand. "Honey, why didn't you tell me? This is wonderful. We can..." Thwack! Theodore Blackwood had snatched his cane back from his bodyguard and swung it. The heavy ebony wood struck Harrison hard across the shins. Harrison howled in one and fell to his knees. "Do not speak to her," Theodore growled. "Do not look at her. You forfeited the right to say her name when you ordered your hirelings to drag her out like trash." Theodore looked up at the crowd. He scanned the room, making eye contact with the board of directors of Sterling Dynamics. "Who are the investors here?" Theodore demanded. Charles Dalloway stepped forward, raising a hand timidly. "Mr. Blackwood, sir. It's an honor. I represent the Dalloway Group." "And you?" Theodore pointed to the table of men from Dubai. They nodded respectfully. "Good," Theodore said. "Listen closely. I am acquiring Sterling Dynamics." Harrison looked up from the floor, clutching his leg. You can't just acquire it. We're going public. I'm the CEO." "You were the CEO," Theodore corrected. "I just bought 51% of your debt from your creditors 10 minutes ago while I was in the elevator. I am calling in the loans now." He looked at Charles. "If you invest one dime in this man's company, the Blackwood Trust will pull every contract we have with your firm. We will freeze your shipping lanes. We will crush you." Charles Dalloway didn't hesitate. He looked at Harrison. "I'm out. The deal is off, Harrison." "Me as well," said the lead investor from Dubai. "We do not do business with enemies of the Blackwood family." In the span of 60 seconds, Harrison Sterling's empire had crumbled to dust. Theodore looked down at Harrison, who was now trembling not from pain, but from the realization that his life was over. "You cared about money, didn't you, Harrison?" Theodore said calmly. "You threw my granddaughter away because you thought she made you look poor. Now you are poor. And she—" Theodore looked at Lily, who was standing tall, the shock fading, replaced by the strength of her bloodline. "She is the queen of this city." Theodore turned to his head of security. "James." "Yes, sir." "Mr. Sterling seems to have spilled wine on the floor. Throw him out." The bodyguard smiled. It was a predatory smile. They moved toward Harrison. "Wait, Lily," Harrison screamed as they grabbed him. "Lily, please, I'm your husband. I love you. Tell them to stop." Lily looked down at him. She looked at Jessica Vane, who was cowering behind a waiter, terrified of being noticed. Lily stepped forward. The room waited for her to show mercy. She was, after all, the quiet, sweet girl from the library. She looked Harrison dead in the eye. "You're right, Harrison," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I did confuse the gross and the net earlier." She leaned down. "But I know exactly how to calculate a total loss." She stood up and turned to the guards. "Get him out of my sight." 30 days had passed since the Red Wedding at the Plaza, as the tabloids were calling it. Harrison Sterling's fall from grace had been swift and brutal. The IPO was cancelled. Sterling Dynamics was in receivership, its assets being stripped and sold off by Blackwood-owned subsidiaries for pennies on the dollar. Harrison had been evicted from the penthouse and was currently crashing on the couch of a former fraternity brother in Queens, one of the few people who hadn't blocked his number. But Harrison Sterling was a cockroach, and cockroaches were hard to kill. He sat in the dimly lit office of Marcus Thorne, a disbarred lawyer turned consultant known for handling the messiest divorces in the city. The office smelled of stale cigar smoke and desperation. "So," Thorne said, leaning back in his leather chair, flipping through a file. "Let me get this straight. You threw your wife out, publicly, humiliated her, and then found out she's the sole heiress to the Blackwood fortune." She deceived me, Harrison said, his voice tight. She committed fraud by omission. I married Lily Jenkins, the pauper. If I had known she was a Blackwood, the dynamic of the marriage would have been different. You mean you would have been nicer? Thorne chuckled darkly. I mean I have rights. Harrison slammed his hand on the desk. We've been married 3 years. In New York, that means equitable distribution of marital assets. Her grandfather's trust, the dividends she received during our marriage. That's all income. Technically, half of that is mine. Thorne raised an eyebrow. Usually, yes, unless there's a prenup. Harrison smiled for the first time in weeks. It was a nasty, triumphant grin. That's the beauty of it. When I married her, she had nothing. I had everything. I was the one who insisted against a prenup because I didn't want to pay for a lawyer for her, and I figured she'd never have anything worth taking. There is no prenup. Thorne whistled. No prenup with a Blackwood. She wasn't a Blackwood then. She was nobody. If there's no prenup. Thorne mused, his eyes lighting up with greed. Then any appreciation of assets during the marriage is fair game. If her trust fund grew, or if she received distributions, we're talking hundreds of millions, maybe billions. Exactly, Harrison said. I don't need the company back. I just need a settlement. If I can get even % of her net worth, I'm set for life. I can start over. I can crush everyone who laughed at me. It's going to be a war, Thorne warned. The Blackwoods have armies of lawyers. They will bury us in paperwork. Let them try, Harrison sneered. I know things about Lily. I know how fragile she is. I know she hates conflict. If we threaten to drag this out to put her personal life on display, to leak stories about her time in the orphanage, she'll fold. She'll pay me to go away. Blackmail disguised as negotiation. Thorne nodded approvingly. I like it. What do you have on her? Harrison pulled a flash drive from his pocket. Diaries. She used to write in them every night. I acquired them before I was kicked out of the penthouse. They detail her therapy sessions, her nightmares, her grandfather's family secrets she uncovered. It's dynamite. Thorne took the drive. Okay, Harrison, let's go hunting. Meanwhile, in the Blackwood estate in the Hamptons, a sprawling fortress-like mansion overlooking the Atlantic Lily sat in the sunroom. She looked different. The nervous, hunched posture was gone. She wore a structured white blazer and dark trousers. Her hair was cut into a sharp, chic bob. She was reviewing documents with her grandfather, Theodore. He's filed a motion, Theodore said, tossing a legal brief onto the glass table. He's demanding 50% of the marital assets. He claims your trust fund income is community property because you commingled funds in the joint checking account. Lily picked up the paper, reading it calmly. He's bluffing. The joint account only ever had his money in it. I never touched my trust. He's also threatening to release personal correspondence, Theodore added, his voice dropping an octave. He claims to have your journals. Lily paused. Her hand tightened slightly on the paper. Those journals contained her deepest fears, her grief over her parents' death and her struggles with anxiety caused by Harrison's emotional abuse. He stole them, Lily said softly. He went through my things. I can have him silenced, Theodore said. The way he said it implied something far more permanent than a gag order. I can make sure he never speaks again. Lily looked out at the ocean. The waves crashed against the rocks, relentless and powerful. She thought about the girl she used to be, the girl who was afraid of the dark, the girl who let a man tell her what to wear and how to speak. No grandfather, Lily said, turning back to him. He wants to bully me. He thinks I'm still the victim. If you silence him, he wins. He becomes a martyr. Then what do you propose? Lily stood up. She walked to the window, her reflection sharp against the glass. He wants a court battle. He wants to talk about assets and contracts. She smiled, and for a second, she looked exactly like Theodore Blackwood. Let's give him one, but call Mr. Sterling's lawyer. Tell them we agree to a deposition, in person. I want to look him in the eye when I destroy him. The conference room at the Blackwood & Associates law firm was larger than Harrison's old apartment. The table was mahogany, long enough to seat 30 people. On one side sat Harrison Sterling and Marcus Thorne. They looked like vultures, ready to pick at a carcass. Harrison was wearing a new suit, bought on credit, no doubt, and trying to project confidence. On the other side sat Lily. Alone. There were no armies of lawyers. No Theodore. Just Lily, sitting with a single manila folder in front of her. Harrison smirked. She's alone. She's scared. She's here to settle. Good morning, Lily, Harrison said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. I'm glad you came to your senses. We don't want a messy trial, do we? Cut the act, Harrison, Lily said coolly. She didn't even look up from her folder. State your demands. Thorne cleared his throat. Mr. Sterling is seeking a lump sum settlement of $500 million. In exchange, he will sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding all private matters of your marriage, return all personal property, including the journals, and waive any future claims to the Blackwood estate. 500 million, Lily repeated, for a marriage that lasted 3 years, where you contributed nothing but debt and emotional abuse. I contributed my prime years, Harrison argued, and I supported you. I paid for your clothes, your food, the roof over your head. You treated me like a pet, Lily corrected, but let's stick to the law. You claim there is no prenup. There isn't, Harrison grinned. I checked every file in the house. I never signed one. You never signed one. We are exposed to the default laws of New York State. Lily opened her folder. She pulled out a single sheet of paper. It looked old. The edges were slightly yellowed. Do you remember where we met, Harrison? Harrison blinked. The Boston Public Library. You were archiving. Correct. And do you remember our first date? You took me to that little Italian place in the North End. You were trying so hard to impress me with your vision for your tech company. What does this have to do with anything? Thorne interrupted. Nostalgia won't lower the price. On that first date, Lily continued, ignoring the lawyer, you made a joke. You said, I'm going to be a billionaire one day, so I better make sure no one marries me just for my money. You pulled a napkin out of the dispenser and wrote a contract on it. You said, sign this and I promise I'll share my billions with you if you stick around. Harrison laughed. That was a joke. It was a napkin in a pizza place. I was flirting. It wasn't a pizza place, it was Giacomo's, Lily said. And it wasn't just a napkin. You were so arrogant, so sure of your future success that you actually wrote out terms. What's mine is mine. What's yours is yours. You signed it. You made me sign it. You even had the waiter sign it as a witness because you thought it was funny. So what? Harrison scoffed. It's a napkin. It's not legally binding. Lily slid the paper across the table. It wasn't a napkin. It was a high-resolution photocopy of that napkin, authenticated with a notary stamp dated 3 years ago. Actually, Harrison, Lily said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. In the state of Massachusetts, a handwritten contract signed by both parties and witnessed is legally binding if the intent is clear. But that's not the best part. She pulled out a second document, This one was typed official and bore the letterhead of a very expensive Boston law firm. "The waiter," Lily said. "Do you remember him?" Harrison frowned. "No, just some kid." "That kid was an undercover private investigator hired by my grandfather," Lily revealed. Harrison went pale. "What? My grandfather knew I had run away," Lily explained. "He knew I was in Boston. He had eyes on me, 24/7. When you started dating me, he ran a background check on you. He knew you were a narcissist and a gold digger before I did. So he had his operative, the waiter, ensure that the joke contract you wrote was formalized." Lily pointed to the typed document. "The waiter notarized the napkin immediately after we left, and then, without you knowing, my grandfather's lawyers filed it as a formal prenuptial agreement under the premise of protecting your future assets. You received a copy in the mail 3 years ago. You signed the receipt of delivery." Lily slid a certified mail receipt across the table. It had Harrison's signature on it. I sign 100 things a week," Harrison stammered. "I didn't read it." "Your negligence is not my problem," Lily said. "You signed a binding agreement, stating that in the event of a divorce, both parties leave with only what they brought into the marriage." Thorne grabbed the documents. He read them furiously. His face fell. He looked at Harrison with pure disgust. "You idiot," Thorne whispered. "You signed a receipt for a prenup you wrote yourself." But that was to protect me," Harrison yelled. "I thought I was protecting my money from her. And it worked." Lily smiled. It was a cold, terrifying smile. "Your money is safe, Harrison. All $0 of it. And my money, my $50 billion, it's safe from you." Harrison sat back, stunned. The trap had been set 3 years ago, fueled by his own arrogance. He had built his own cage. "So," Lily said, closing the folder. "No 500 million, no settlement." She stood up and leaned over the table. "However, I am willing to make a trade." "A trade?" Harrison looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "I want the flash drive," Lily said, "and I want the original copies of my journals, right now." "And if I give them to you," Harrison asked, "what do I get?" Lily looked at him with pity. "You get to walk out of this room without being arrested for extortion and theft. I recorded this entire meeting, Harrison. You admitted to stealing my property and blackmailing me. That's a felony. Hand over the drive and I won't call the DA." Harrison looked at Thorne. Thorne was already packing his briefcase. "You're on your own, pal," Thorne said, standing up. "I don't represent felons who lie to their lawyers." Thorne walked out. Harrison sat alone, facing the woman he had thrown out like trash. He reached into his pocket, his hand trembling, and pulled out the flash drive. He slid it across the mahogany table. Lily picked it up. She didn't check it. She knew he was too broken to lie anymore. "Goodbye, Harrison," she said. She turned and walked toward the door. "Lily!" he called out. His voice was cracked, pathetic. "What am I supposed to do? I have nothing." Lily paused at the door. She looked back over her shoulder. "You have your freedom," she said. "Try not to waste it this time." 1 year later. The lunch rush at Sal's burger joint in downtown Newark was brutal. The air smelled of grease and burnt onions. "Order up on table 4, the cook yelled, slamming a plate of fries onto the metal counter. "I'm coming, I'm coming," Harrison muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead with a stained rag. He grabbed the plate, his shoes slipping slightly on the greasy floor. He looked older than his years now. The sharp jawline was hidden behind a patchy beard he couldn't afford to groom, and the arrogance in his eyes had been replaced by a permanent, dull exhaustion. He dropped the fries at table 4, a couple of teenagers who didn't even look up from their phones to thank him. As he walked back to the counter, To refill the ketchup bottles, he glanced up at the small TV mounted in the corner of the diner. It was tuned to a local news channel. And finally today, a historic moment in Manhattan, the news anchor announced. The Blackwood Foundation, led by its new CEO, has just unveiled the largest public library endowment in New York City history. Harrison froze. He stared at the screen. There she was. Lily stood at a podium made of glass and steel. She looked breathtaking. She wasn't wearing the vintage silk of her past, nor the flashy, revealing clothes he had tried to force her into. She wore a tailored suit of deep royal blue, authoritative and elegant. Her hair was swept back, revealing the diamond earrings that glinted in the camera flashes. But it was her face that captivated him. She looked unstoppable. For a long time, Lily said to the crowd on the TV, her voice clear and resonant, "I was made to feel that my value was determined by others, that I was a prop in someone else's story. But I learned that true worth isn't something you are given. It is something you own." The camera panned out. Standing next to her, beaming with pride, was Theodore Blackwood. And in the front row, the investors from Dubai. The Heritage Foundation Board. Even Charles Dalloway was there, applauding enthusiastically, eager to be in her good graces. Harrison felt a physical ache in his chest, a hollowness. He had held a diamond in his hand and thrown it away because he wanted a shiny piece of glass. "Hey, buddy," Harrison snapped out of his trance. A customer at the counter was waving an empty coffee mug. "You gonna refill this, or are you gonna stare at the TV all day?" Harrison looked at the customer, then back at the screen, where Lily was cutting the ribbon, the city of New York rising behind her like a throne. "I'm sorry," Harrison whispered, though he wasn't talking to the customer. "Whatever, man. Just pour the coffee." Harrison Sterling, the man who wanted to be a king, picked up the pot and poured. The applause was deafening. Lily stepped down from the podium, her heart full. Theodore met her at the bottom of the steps. He looked frailer than he had a year ago. The cane was no longer just an accessory, but a necessity. But his grip on her hand was as strong as ever. "You did good, little bird," he said, his voice raspy. "Or should I say, lioness?" Lily smiled and kissed his cheek. "I had a good teacher." They walked slowly through the crowd. This time there were no whispers of mockery, no sneers. The room parted for them with genuine reverence. Women who had once laughed at her dress now clamored to ask her who her tailor was. Men who had ignored her now begged for a moment of her time to pitch their ideas. Lily handled them all with grace, but with a distance. She knew who these people were now. She knew the game, and she knew how to win it. As they reached the private exit, away from the cameras and the noise, Lily stopped. She looked out at the city lights twinkling in the twilight. "Grandfather," she said, "do you think he saw it?" Theodore didn't need to ask who he was. "Does it matter?" Lily thought for a moment. She thought about the fear she used to live with, the feeling of being small. And then she looked at her reflection in the glass door, strong, independent, and free. "No," she said softly. "It doesn't." Theodore nodded. "Good. Because the past is a heavy stone, Lily. You have to put it down if you want to fly." A black limousine pulled up to the curb. The driver opened the door. "Where to?" "Ms. Blackwood," the driver asked. Lily looked back at the gala one last time, then turned to the open road ahead. "Forward," she said. "Take us forward." She stepped into the car. The door closed with a solid final thud, and the queen of the city disappeared into the night, leaving the ghosts of her past behind forever. And that is the story of how Harrison Sterling lost $1 billion fortune because he couldn't see the value of the woman standing right in front of him. It's a brutal reminder that arrogance is the most expensive flaw a person can have. Harrison wanted a trophy, but he threw away a treasure. In the end, Lily didn't just get revenge. She got something better. She got her life back. What do you think? Did Harrison deserve his fate, or was the punishment too harsh? And would you have signed that napkin contract if you were in his shoes? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, karma, and ultimate redemption, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We have plenty more tales of high society drama and real-life twists coming your way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.